What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. What if Triple G beats Canelo? Like, I know that, of course, it's two guys going to be in the ring and anything can happen in boxing, so there's always a chance that this guy or this guy could win, so that's not anything new. But really consider what the ramifications are if Triple G, Gennady Golovkin, were to beat Saul Canelo Alvarez on September the 17th. And I really don't know if many of us have actually considered that actually happening. Like, okay, we went from having the two super controversial scorecards. First, in the draw, in their first fight, where, Triple G, to most people's eyes, had pretty much won by a couple of rounds over Canelo, basically taking control in the middle and most of the late rounds. And then in the rematch, where, that was just a fantastic fight. It was just so back and forth. Both of them had to dig so deep just to persevere through some of the more difficult rounds. Well, the judges ended up awarding Canelo Alvarez a close majority decision win in that rematch. And in both the first fight between the two and in the rematch, Triple G was a slight favorite. He was like a minus 150 to minus 170 favorite in both of those fights, even after Canelo pretty much overachieved in the first fight. Like, most people really thought Triple G was going to win that first one. Canelo at least made it super competitive. Even if you think Triple G won the first one, Canelo exceeded at least most of our expectations, and Triple G was still the favorite in the rematch. And obviously in between, that's when Canelo got caught up with the, clenbuterol scandal. So maybe a lot of people thought that Triple G was going to win more emphatically in the rematch because they thought that, Canelo would be without whatever he was using based on those drug tests after the first fight. But then there was also the idea of, well, Canelo's now had 12 rounds in the ring where he didn't get dropped in the first fight nor in the second fight against Triple G. So having those 12 rounds of experience, having felt what the guy's power feels like, and the guy's going to be, 36, 37 years old, not 34, 35 years old in the rematch. So Canelo, there was a lot of reason to believe that he would be more emboldened in the rematch. And he obviously fought that second fight much more emphatically on his front foot, taking much of the fight to Triple G, who was basically looking to win a lot of those middle and late rounds behind a jab. Very uncharacteristic for Triple G to rely on those tools. Not that he didn't have them, but to have to rely on those tools. And just because you get the fighter out of his plan A and having to then work behind the jab doesn't mean that that guy lost the fight. Doesn't mean that Triple G shouldn't have still been awarded maybe a close decision win in that rematch. But again, I could have gone either way in that second fight. But going into this third fight, because of the ramifications of those scorecards in the first and the second fight and what those decisions did to the careers of both Canelo and Triple G, where you basically had Canelo going this way, basically then fighting, Daniel Jacobs, Sergey Kovalev, and then conquering the 168-pound division, becoming undisputed at 168. Now, Canelo was kind of still somewhat new to middleweight because prior to those fights with Triple G, he had only fought against, Miguel Cotto and, a catchweight fight against Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. at middleweight. He wasn't an experienced middleweight fighter leading up to the two fights with Triple G. Well, him then conquering 168 after those fights, that was a remarkable achievement, even though you have varying opinions on the quality of Callum Smith, Billy Joe Saunders, and Caleb Plant. I look at those as being super credible and quality opponents and very, very good wins. But I get it. Like, people differ in their opinions on that. But Canelo dominated that 168-pound division with those wins, even though, of course, he never fought David Benavidez, who had relinquished the WBC belt twice without even losing a fight, right? But yeah, Canelo was a monster at 168. But going into this third fight with Triple G, Canelo is a huge favorite. Meanwhile, Triple G basically had the fight with Steve Rose, the controversial super close fight with Derevianchenko, which many believe Derevianchenko should have won that fight. Super close fight. We had to see, Triple G dig deep in, one of his most difficult fights of his career against Derevianchenko. Some believe that was the first time that they, with their own eyes, saw Triple G actually lose a fight, regardless of what the actual decisions were in those fights against Canelo. And then Triple G fought Cesar Romero and Ryota Murata in a title unification fight. So that got Triple G his second, recapturing of the middleweight title. The first was a vacant title bout against Derevianchenko, where the IBF belt was up for grabs. But Triple G, reputation-wise, going into those two fights with Canelo, he was looked at and seen as a pretty historic middleweight, up there with, the Carlos Monzones, Marvin Hagler, Bernard Hopkins, some of the, middleweight greats of the past. Triple G was in that club. But, with the way the decisions played out against Canelo, that kind of knocked him down a peg. Like, you don't see anybody saying Triple G is the greatest middleweight of all time. It just kind of kept him maybe in the discussion, but, maybe third or fourth at best. Whereas if he were to have secured, say, a decision win in that rematch against Canelo, even if, he disappointingly earned a draw in the first fight, if he had secured a win in that rematch against Canelo, you would have totally different narratives playing out. Whereas, it's Canelo that is the truly historic, just kind of one of those all-time pound for pound, at least in those discussions, fighter. Whereas, again, Triple G's trying to hold on to his, all-time stake or his all-time positioning in just the middleweight division. So those decisions were hugely consequential. And now with a 40-year-old Triple G, he is now a massive underdog against Canelo. So I repeat, what if Triple G wins this trilogy match against Canelo Alvarez? Could you imagine how much of a shift of narrative that will then be? Because, the people who are already having the discussion in Canelo versus Triple G3, they're more so having a question of whether Canelo wins via decision or via stoppage. And, how competitive will Triple G be in the trilogy fight? That's kind of the conversation that's playing out. Nobody is really entertaining the idea that Triple G can win this third fight against Canelo. And there, again, there's a lot of reason to why that is. Not only was Canelo super competitive in those first two fights, and now, Triple G's a few years older than that, but we've also seen what Canelo did at the 168-pound division, one division up from where Triple G spent his whole career, right? And this is Triple G's debut at 168. Whereas, Canelo knocked out an aging, past prime Sergey Kovalev. So Canelo's fought above not only 160, but above 168. So there is reason, again, to really or nearly dismiss Triple G's chances of winning this trilogy fight. I get why people feel that way. But think about what it would mean to Triple G's legacy if he is to somehow pull this off against a 32-year-old Canelo Alvarez. I mean, first of all, you would automatically have to reinsert his stature at wherever you position him. Granted, this fight is not at middleweight, but you would have to then consider, well, he beat Canelo in the third, so he's the one who kind of put a stamp on it, even though you could argue that that would merit a fourth fight, because then you would have a draw, a win for Canelo, and a win for Triple G. But this would undoubtedly, for instance, be the greatest win of Triple G's career. Like, what are his greatest wins to date? Daniel Jacobs, David Lemieux, then maybe Ryota Murata or Derevianchenko. Like, he hasn't had many signature wins as dominant as he was in the middleweight division. First of all, he never fought, Dmitry Pirog, earlier in his career. That would have been like a prime versus prime, middleweight showdown. He never fought, Billy Joe Saunders, Kid Chocolate. But it was, not for a lack of trying. It was mostly others who seemed to be ducking a fight with Triple G. He was like the boogeyman, even as a belt holder. He was largely avoided in his prime. But man, think about how much, the almost, not disappointing, but did he truly realize the maximum resume representation of his abilities, he being Triple G. Well, if he beats Canelo in this trilogy fight, then any of those concerns, because of the, you could argue unfortunate decisions, or just, unfortunate for Triple G at least, decisions of those two Canelo fights, much of that gets washed away with a win for a 40-year-old Triple G. That would just be one of the most improbable, it's hard to say comeback story, but just a remarkable accomplishment if the 40-year-old Triple G can beat the 32-year-old Canelo. And I get it. Some people will say, well, I mean, it's not like we didn't see him do it twice already, which, again, many people feel that that is the case. But even most of those people who feel Triple G won one or both of their prior fights, even they are nearly dismissive of Triple G's chances in this trilogy fight. So, Canelo losing to Dimitri Bivol in his last fight, I feel like it might have knocked him off the top of most people's, pound for pound list. I still have him as number one, but, his legacy didn't take a huge hit because this was such an outsized, ambitious effort on the part of Canelo to try to beat the WBA undefeated WBA champ Dimitri Bivol. Now, there was such a bubble in opinion in Canelo's abilities. Like, most thought that he would go to 175 and not only beat Dimitri Bivol, but then probably pivot and beat Artur Beterbiev. That was the idea. They thought that Canelo was just going to run roughshod in the light heavyweight division. Many believe that. Many experts believe that. Media members and otherwise. Canelo was that red hot just because of his fight-by-fight performance and just stopping Caleb Plant, Billy Joe Saunders, dominating Callum Smith. It didn't sound that far-fetched to think that Canelo could just run roughshod at light heavyweight. It sounds a little bit crazy now, just given what we got in that fight with Dimitri Bivol, but that just shows, fans and media members' recency bias when you see, oh, Canelo's red hot, and then you see him lose in the way that he lost to Dimitri Bivol, which that was not a 115, 113 fight. Dimitri Bivol won like 9 rounds to our eyes, right, against Canelo Alvarez. Don't be fooled by those close scorecards. Boxing almost embarrassed itself if Dimitri Bivol didn't win the 12th round, but that's another conversation for another day. Now, if Canelo, unlike his loss to Dimitri Bivol, if he loses to Triple G in this trilogy fight, that's a mega legacy hit to Canelo Alvarez. And again, that is the largest legacy booster to the career of Triple G. So, look, we're going to get into the actual analysis and prediction of this fight as we near the fight date. But I just wanted to put some early thoughts out there and just to ask you guys to consider the possibility of Triple G maybe beating Canelo Alvarez. I know it sounds a little bit wild, but I mean, this is a trilogy fight. This is what I consider to be, or I would assume to be, an extremely motivated Gennady Golovkin. Not that he wasn't extremely motivated in that rematch against Canelo, but it's almost like additionally, what makes people feel that Triple G doesn't have a chance in this trilogy fight is because you know how motivated he was in that second fight against Canelo, and he still didn't get the love on the judges' scorecards. And 2 of those 3 judges, by the way, Weisfeld and I believe Dave Moretti, are going to be judging in this trilogy fight. So 2 of the 3 judges that judge Canelo versus Triple G 2 are going to be judging Canelo versus Triple G 3. You might argue that's even more reason to think that Canelo is going to beat Triple G. But just imagine if Triple G is able to dig deep and find a way to beat Canelo Alvarez in this trilogy fight. By the way, one of the things that I'm thinking about in analyzing this fight, which again, we're going to do, a couple videos down the line, but who's going to be the master of pace in this one? Like, who's going to be sucking wind to where they are kind of not at the mercy, but they are kind of being led pace-wise against the other guy? Because Canelo, what I've realized in these recent fights, like his whole foray in the 168-pound division, is he's kind of become a master of being economical in his energy expenditure. Like, he doesn't waste energy. He's kind of subtly changing levels and doing different things like feints and such to get the opponent to react, and then just being highly efficient in his punch by punch efficacy. Like, he's just super effective in every little burst of energy that he's delivering. He's making every one of those punches count. So he's not somebody who's just a busybody in there, right? So you could argue, and we saw it against Dmitry Bivol, who's a volume puncher. He is a bit of a busybody. He's always kind of moving, always looking for opportunities to throw, if not combinations, at least the jab repeatedly. Canelo, again, exercises economy a lot more in his energy output, and that kind of costed him against Dmitry Bivol. Can a 40-year-old Triple G still push the pace against Canelo, even if it's just behind a jab? If he can do that over the course of 12 rounds, we might have a competitive fight on our hands. But on the flip side of that, I can't help but just think that Canelo is going to be going to Triple G's body early and often. And, you know, we've seen in recent fights, and even beforehand, Triple G hasn't been the best at, well, you know, let me stop. I've never seen Triple G get dropped, and I still haven't seen him, you know, get stopped or even come close to getting stopped. So, yeah, we might look at his body language and see him kind of sucking gas and backing up a little bit when he gets hit by certain shots, especially to the body. But it's not like he hasn't then reacted and responded to that well, to where he then goes on to win the fight. Canelo fights notwithstanding. So, you know, even if we saw Ryota Murata look like he's having early round success against Triple G, it was Triple G stopping Ryota Murata in the 9th round. But still, I don't think that Triple G likes getting hit to the body. I know Canelo can deliver those blows to the body repeatedly and viciously. But again, what if Triple G is able to kind of push the pace against somebody who, you know, has gotten better gas tank wise, but who I still don't look to be as somebody who can throw, you know, 60 plus punches around and, you know, round over round over round. I mean, Canelo for much of his earlier career kind of had the reputation of, yes, being an outstanding fighter, but having, you know, somewhat cardio issues, even in fights that he was kind of dominating, like against Alfredo Angulo. We'll see if a 40-year-old Triple G is able to push the pace with Canelo. But yeah, we'll have that conversation down the line. I just want to get your thoughts on, I mean, just how monumental of a feat it would be and how consequential on both the Canelo side and Triple G side and just boxing as a whole if Triple G can pull off the win against Canelo in this trilogy fight. But yeah, that would be pretty wild, right? Not that it shouldn't be within the realm of possibility again, but still, I mean, just given the odds and just given the swing of the odds, being that Triple G was the favorite in not only the first, but in the second fight as well, Triple G was the favorite and is a major underdog in the 3rd fight, both because of his age and because of everything that we've seen from Canelo since those first 2 Canelo versus Triple G fights. But yeah, let me know what your early thoughts are on Canelo versus Triple G in the comments. And please, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.